So I think for me, it was always about challenging the status quo, about the phase that I was in, the place I was in, and how do I get to the best of, the best, how do I stretch the experience to the maximum? I think this
Hmm.
is something, and it's a trait about people. You can choose to live at the edge of it. You can choose
Hmm.
to actually put a step in it, and you can choose to go all around the circle and like run everywhere and maybe even break and go somewhere out. And for me, it was about that buzzing, and like how to experience life to its fullest.
That was the voice of Amal Dokhan, managing partner of 500 MENA. I am your host, Ali Zwail, and this is the Startups Arabia podcast, where you learn about the Arab startups ecosystem from the best founders, investors, and operators in the region. My guest today is Amal Dokhan. Amal is an entrepreneurship advocate, a venture capitalist, and ecosystem builder operating for more than a decade in the MENA region. She's the managing partner at 500 Global, managing the Sanabil 500 MENA Seed Accelerator Fund, focusing on investing in early stage tech startups. And she previously worked at King Abdullah University of Science and Technology, managing the accelerator programs and delivering corporate innovation programs with many large organizations. She's also worked on several government initiatives during her time in the Small and Medium Enterprise Authority, as well as supporting technology projects in other governmental entities. She's angel invested in many startups, as well as managing Babson College's MENA entrepreneurial programs. And she sits on the board of the Venture Capital and Private Equity Association in Saudi, as well as the board of the Middle East Venture Capital Association in UAE. She's a Kauffman Fellow and has been featured 2 years in a row, 23 and 24, as one of the most powerful women in the Middle East by Forbes. Enjoy this interesting conversation with Amal. Welcome to the Startups Arabia podcast. My guest today, with that steaming coffee in front of her, is Amal Dokhan. She's the managing partner of 500 MENA. And I'm really excited to get this conversation going because Amal, over the last decade or a little more, has had an incredible impact on the Saudi startup ecosystem in general. And of course, with 500 being the most active investor in the whole MENA region in terms of number of deals, I'm sure she's seen a lot, and it's going to be a really fun conversation. Welcome, Amal.
Thank you for hosting me, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. Uh, all right, Amal, there's just so much you've accomplished over the years. So I was like wondering where to start the conversation and, which entry point we should take. And I thought that a good point would be the year 2013, because it seems to me that that was kind of a turning point in your life where you had maybe had a career in different directions and tried different things. But it was 2013 that you really focused and zeroed in on startups as where you want to make an impact. So tell me more about that.
It's interesting that you pointed out 2013. It's a number that I normally say when people ask about my background, obviously. What you just highlighted is quite true. I've worked in different sectors, that has nothing to do with the financial sector or the investment initially, because I graduated college in 1999 and I've been working for quite some time, in education. I've done a little bit of services and consultancy, bit of marketing, started my own company at some point. But I think, maybe what led to 2013 shift is when I went to do my master's degree in strategic marketing, and I started a company with a friend. And honestly, that world was quite intriguing. And as you know, those were the early days of venture. Very few ones have started before, very few VCs existed at that time. So it was not like a common knowledge that you would walk around and you hear somebody's building a startup, or there is something called a venture capital, or what does that even mean? And when I started my master's, it was really the talk of what's happening, while studying. And I was so intrigued about this world. I know about corporations, I know about products and all of these stuff, but I've never thought that this is something that is that accessible for anyone to start, easily, especially with the use of technology. And I think during that time, I got to explore more what does venture mean. And part of it is like being part of a tech company myself, seeing, the hustles and the struggles of building the technology. What do we need to do? Who is the developer who's going to do that? How are we going to find someone, and getting that to the market. Should we build, as many services and products first before we bring it to the market, or shall we, what we were talking about, the minimum viable product? And that was not really in the minds of people, because everyone wanted to bring something perfect, especially if it's new. So all these questions were actually intriguing, and part of my studies was a focus on consumer behavior. And oh my God, what a life-changing knowledge when I started to dig deeper, towards consumers, understanding behavior. What does it mean to know what people think and feel, and how can I design products for that? So honestly, this was the start when I started to read more and more about that. 2013 is the time where I joined King Abdullah University of Science and Technology, and I joined the seed fund department. And, I'm not really ashamed of saying that when I joined, I didn't know what to expect joining an R&D university of lots of deep tech and technologies that were built in the lab. And when I was going through the website as I applied to the job, it was all talking about clean technologies, solar, biotech, building membranes for water desalination. And I'm like, just researching and researching and feeling terrified of this world and how am I going to survive, over there. When I got the job, and I moved to actually Cows, and I started to meet these people. And honestly, the I would say that the learning curve and the will and the drive to do that was at its peak in my mind. I was just under that adrenaline rush of understanding all these technologies. What is it doing globally? What is the impact in the region? Why this is happening? And I'm almost as if somebody gave me that, injection. It was right into the brain, and like the roller coaster started. And those are people that are working in the lab. I can see them. I see Aramco at the corner, the research center. I see Boeing here, and I see Sabic here, and I'm like, things are happening. And honestly, the realization was like, yes, it was amazing what I've done before, but where was I, from this world? This is where I felt the fit towards, supporting founders, the build up. What does it mean to bring a product to a company? What does that journey look like? Meeting these people, especially talking deep technology in 2013, that's almost like in the region was not that much of heard of, right? You would see all the people that are building these types of technologies going abroad. They don't fundraise in the region. They don't build in the region. And there were some of the best labs, at Coast, still until today. And they're attracting all these people to come and build and possibly give it to these companies. So you can imagine the impact of me going through that, and the fast learning. I have no time to waste. Excitement, and I have no time to waste. I have no time to say I don't know. I have no time to say I'm not going to be able to help or any of that. I'm going to find the way. I'm just going to get it done. And I was wired in that period of time to just help. And as I'm doing this, I'm learning more and more about startups, meeting more founders coming from abroad, people that I travel and I see. And at that time, Adi, I used to go a lot, to Egypt, and to the Greek campus, meeting people there. Where are the companies happening? Turkey, there was Startup Istanbul. You'll see a lot of me there meeting companies, YC, TechCrunch, all of these, players coming there, and then going to Lebanon, MIT Enterprise Forum, Jordan, Tunis, Morocco. And then suddenly I'm in the midst of something that I did not see my life turning into. And I had to really teach myself fast and really do it. I had to be part of the building. I cannot be just someone who's saying, I know startups without actually being part of a startup as well. Although when I was in the master's, I was doing something similar. It just didn't click in my mind, to be honest. And that's how I got into this whole world. That's why 2013 was quite an exciting year. And then a couple of years later, I had the opportunity, I was selected to join a program called REAP at MIT Sloan. It's regional acceleration, program. And it was about building a project in your hometown, but attending, courses, and it's a 2 years program. And going there, it was almost like, you know, the East and the West and comparing. What are we doing? What are they doing? Is there a way that we can go ahead of the curve? And it was so exciting and so intimidating at the same time. But I was just like, I'm there to come back and do it. And maybe that's where things start. Like when I went there, when I got to know people, I knew all the beginnings, of known companies that I've met, founders, the people, the ecosystem players, between, Stanford and between MIT. And maybe you can see me bringing a lot of academia here, but I think everyone has a lot of starting points. Some people were lucky to be in the heart of the startups. I was lucky to be in the heart of the ecosystems itself and the builders and what are the components and the layers that are needed. And it just got me more excited to learn more. And how do we localize that? And I think if I would say anything about my journey, it's about how do I bring this, but it has to make sense for here. It has to be not a copy paste, for what's happening there.
Absolutely.
And that was the reason, why I would go and see, what's happening. I finished obviously my reprogram and I signed up to more. So I got a diploma in strategy, innovation, and entrepreneurship. And I was spending my time at the Trust Center, with Bell Ollett and others, just meeting startups, attending these workshops. And talking to the VCs there. So again, think of all of those wiring. And when I think back, I remember I was like in a different kind of level in terms of thinking. And then a year later, I went to Stanford to attend the design thinking school at Hasso-Plattner Institute. Another
Hmm.
jump about everything can be designed if we just know the problem and have all what it takes of all these pieces. It doesn't have to be perfect. There's always experimentation, and we can build a program, we can build an ecosystem, we can build a product, we can build a company. And I think that mindset just brought me back as a person who can see a framework, of the build. And I think there's nothing that I can hear today that will not make sense to me for a technology or for anything. And I got high exposure to a lot of stuff in a very short period of time. Um,
Hmm.
and honestly, if there's something that I would say, it's just the rest is history, after that, because I started investing and angel investing in small companies and I started to be more involved. We started the first accelerator in King Abdullah University of Science and Technology. It was called 910th. And then after that, the Qaddam, which is still running until today, but it was a grant based and it was well needed at that time to actually show the possibilities and give a little bit of support to move the ecosystem. And one of the things I remember at that time when we wanted to register, for example, foreign companies in the kingdom, and how would that actually happen? It wasn't something that is common. It was not, an easy thing. As you know, the regulation used to be that you have to be a Saudi national, you have to do this and that. And I remember because of the nature of the companies, we were all able to lobby with Sagia back in the days. It was not a ministry, it was just
Hmm.
an authority that is in
Investment
charge of
authority.
investment. Exactly. And we lobbied with them to create the first CRs and all of these stuff. And I think without getting into, more details, it was I almost have seen how the region have shifted, over a decade or 12 years maybe, of time. And now I can see how things make sense, in terms of where we are in the cycle and
Yeah.
how things are evolving. And especially in Saudi Arabia, it's you see things happening in a certain unique way as well in terms of development for investment. But yeah, man, it's quite a
Yeah.
journey. You're bringing me back to quite an interesting tape of thoughts.
Yeah, it is like there are so many strings I could pull on from that journey, including your background education and also the design thinking aspect. But maybe I'll start with the general first and then go to the personal. So, I mean,
Sure.
KAUST, it's a university of science, technology, etc. I mean, what was the thinking behind their like deep dive into entrepreneurship and working on something, building an ecosystem for entrepreneurship and stuff like that?
So you have to know what is the reasoning of creating King Abdullah University of Science and Technology. So,
Yeah.
the latest King Abdullah had a vision about creating a beacon of research, that is highly situated in the kingdom to impact, the rest, not just the region, the globe as well. And it was a dream. That was the dream of a king of like to create this unique spot. How do we create this spot? How do we bring the best minds to bring them to the kingdom at that time? How do we offer them the best life? How do we make them come and create their innovation? So it was highly based on innovation, highly based on solving bigger problems than any other smaller kind of usual problems that you actually see in an innovative way, in a highly unique matter. That's why you see a tech transfer office as part of the university, which is in charge of like creating and licensing IPs. It has a law team basically with a bunch of law firms and a lot of people that are in charge of just making sure that these are done in the right way and these technologies are registered and protected based on the
Mm-hmm.
nature and the sector commercially. And then the ultimate goal is like, how do we bring the people? So then the idea of the campus came of like, we create a campus that allows people. What brings people? Well, they need actually, besides the education and the best equipment around the globe, like the biggest and the fastest, highest computing kind of power actually existing coast, in the region, exactly as an infrastructure, the best lab. So they created a strong infrastructure. Then they created an almost a living place. So there's houses, there's facilities, and all of these stuff. And then there is the vision of I'll connect you to all these corporates, and I will actually collaborate with the global best universities to allow for this research to happen. And that's how it actually was created. So it's built on a base of innovation. And you're talking about the start of like cast around 2009, at the beginning, 2009, 2010. When I joined, it was 2013. And there was part of the university was called the Economic Development department.
Mm.
And the economic development was all about, building those relationships and strengths with the corporates. There was a research part. And on the other hand, it was about how do we commercialize all this research that happens. And this is a global problem. There's a lot of research doesn't make it to the market. All these brilliant minds, a lot of amazing, budgets that are being spent. So when we joined, there was already a seed program when I joined, and it was giving grants to researchers,
Mm.
around 250Ks at that time to help them commercialize. But you know what? It's just there's something, we have to admit that being a researcher and a scientist, you want to continue developing in the lab. You want to do more science. You want to do and create more research as the nature of what you do and what you have been studying, you've been great at. And the chances that you will have a researcher that will convert to a CEO and be able to do both, it's actually hard, but it happens. It happened
Mm.
globally. And I think when I came and we looked at the program, it was like, what do we need to bring more? And it was about the know how and the mindset of entrepreneurship, because research alone will not make it to commercialization. But if I have research and understand what problems that do exist in the industry, and we were not looking at consumer problems, we were looking at industry problems. I'll give you a
Mm-hmm.
very quick example. Um, an oil pipe, where actually things cannot stop, and there could be sometimes problems to be inspected. They need to shut it down from end to end in order to resolve. That is
Right.
a lot of inefficiencies, wasted money. There was a creation of a robot that actually can go
Mm.
and has the sensors and detect and all of these stuff. There is a lot of experiments that needs to be done in order to build something like this. So these are the type of stuff that we used to look at. And the difficult part is like inspecting and finding out, if I'm working with the big corporations that does oil and gas, what are the processes, compliances, and all of these stuff. So then we thought of the accelerator. Let us create a
Mm.
program that will allow these minds to come with their own products, right? Or a non product, but the thinking of a problem. And let's work on the mindset shift. And when I say mindset shift, it's not about saying what you were doing is bad. This is about telling you how others have done it, in a faster way. So we looked at so many programs to learn from. We looked at UC Berkeley. We looked at so many other universities of like who created programs that accelerated, deep technologies towards bringing them to the market.
Yeah.
And here we started to learn a lot. There was an eye-opening moment where we were like, yeah, maybe we need to do this, because getting a scientist from the lab was difficult. They're there to
Yeah.
do a job, so we had to do it at night. So we started by sessions at night, and then we started to adopt in weekends. Then we started to talk to the PIs, and like, so there was a lot of things that and lobbying that we had to do. And that's why maybe the ecosystem piece goes dear to my heart, because it's not just about the product, it's not about the service. this is about understanding all the players and doing a lot of stakeholder management and a lot of alignment, because everyone is trying to do good in their own. And I think this is the biggest problem in, any ecosystem that we can talk about today here, especially in the region. Like, everybody's trying to do their own initiatives and everything, and at the end of the day, how do we get as many as possible if it makes sense? So you do have a responsibility, and I feel we have a responsibility when we see alignments to actually go forward and talk and create initiatives. And at that time, the accelerator was the best solution, to be honest, for us. And that's how we started the first one.
Yeah, interesting. And all right, I'm gonna jump to the present day, so to speak. And can you tell us more
Sure.
about 500 MENA? I mean, what is your focus? What is different for 500 MENA versus the global vision, or is it basically the same thing? And the different entities in 500 MENA?
Yeah, yeah. So 500 in general, as you know, they actually come into emerging markets really early. And the idea is to come as early as possible to be part of the fabric of the ecosystem, to be part of the community, to be part of the creation mode itself. And that's why 500 is very big on community activities and like being present, being seen most of the time, and bringing founders and investors together. Like, we have so many signature events that we run. Like, next week, we have our own FII. Actually, this week, I'm like, not next week
Mhm.
anymore. So it's actually in a couple of days. We're doing an FII gathering for investors, founders, and any visitor who's coming from outside, and it's the Future Investment Initiative week in Riyadh. So it's a very, very, very busy week from a lot of people coming from all around the globe. So we do, build on these kind of events on the side where we can actually leverage, the value of the founders. So going back to your question, um, every, I think, region like Latin, Southeast Asia, Korea, and different parts of the world. There's the Turkey one. There's a chapter in Egypt as well. So every actually region has its own people. So 500 works with local GPs. And those GPs basically have and the know-how about the stage and about what is happening in the region at that time and what could be the best approach to start and what are the complementary things that we can build on and whom should we work with, what sort of stage should we focus on. So I would say that the DNA of 500 definitely remains, in all of, the countries, but there are
Yeah,
different ways of doing it. So the way we run our program could be slightly different than what's being run, in San Francisco. Then
of
others may
course.
have reduced the accelerating component and they started to focus more on later stage. So the one in MENA, as you know, we had a fund called Falcons in 2017, and it invested in
Hmm.
so many amazing companies. Like, there is most of them now in Series B and Series C. So we see the success of the previous vintage, in 500.
Yeah.
And then we started in 2021. Uh, and the 21 start was slightly different, is where we needed to utilize and have a presence this time. So it was not just a
Mm.
fund, and having people. No, there will be a physical presence in the region where we can run the programs in a much more periodical kind of approach with a dedicated fund to this accelerator. And here is where Sanabil 500 Mina Seed Accelerator Fund was created. And there is a reason why it carries the Sanabil name, under the fund. So as you know, 500 runs, funds that are dedicated mostly for accelerator programs, and I'll explain more about the program. Uh, but this particular fund has also, the main mandate is the accelerator, but we do have a direct, mandate as well, meaning we could invest in companies without putting them in the accelerator program. So we do assess. If we feel that the program will add value, then definitely we will tell the founder, we see a great fit. And then if it's not, then maybe it's better in that time and in that journey for the company that they continue the building, and not be
Hmm.
part of the program because they have joined others. That there could be so many reasons why they don't do it. And the program runs in Riyadh, and it's actually a 12 weeks program with 2 weeks at the beginning in person. We call them the foundation, and 2 last weeks, which we call them the investment ones. Who
Mm.
joins the accelerator? It's actually open for across that. We still invest in pre-seed and seed, so we don't invest in Series A. So any kind of early stage is our sweet spot of investment.
Right.
We
In the
remain to be
accelerator.
sector in the accelerator and in the direct ones as well. We've done out of the previous fund, we've done about a couple of Series A's, but in the
Yeah.
second fund, which we closed now for this
Hmm.
year for 2024, so we're in fund two now. We actually do not do Series A because 500 has another, kind of fund that should be launched also
Got it.
soon that will tackle this stage. So our job will remain in cultivating seed stage companies. And we've invested in more than 119 companies across, the portfolio since we started. We remain to be sector agnostic. The only thing that I would tell founders, we're happy to look at, the different sectors and the different kind of pauses. We've done a little bit of like some of the companies that may seem to be, a little bit of different than the rest of the portfolio, but I think it's about assessing the stage of the company, the founder's commitment, the problem, the relevance to Middle East and North Africa. So we mandate that these people are actually here, um, and basically this is how we're doing it. And then there's other layers. So besides the accelerator, we run VC Unlocked. So this is the community piece, the education program.
Mm.
So it's a shorter version of what's happening in Stanford, between 500 and Stanford. Yeah. So we do a 4 days program. So there is one happening next week, actually right after FII, for VCs in the region. And then we have Angels Unlocked, and it's targeted towards unifying the mindset of angels and how to invest, what are the instruments, and all of these stuff. We go to legal, commercial examples, from here, and we invite community members to come and participate so people see a real taste of who's a GP who started 7 or 8 years ago and someone who's starting today, and really ask all the questions about setup and so on and so forth, deal sourcing and all of these stuff. And then the community aspect, and we continue to evolve, as we say. Even the program, we have updated it many times. Like every year we say, all right, these are the feedback that we got from the founders. We shortened some of the workshops and we added a lot in one-on-ones. So when we decide on the segment, we actually look which actually investors would be right fit to sit with them when they come, which mentors we should actually come, and sit with the founders here and really offer that value and specific sectors needs. And we're very known for our own, kind of recipe towards addressing the KPI, and how do we really
Mm.
accelerate the growth. So growth hacking is at the essence of the program, and we assess at the first day, but by the time they get to demo day, there's definitely a progress, whether from an investment point of view or from a product point of view or a launch, because we invested in pre-launch companies that launched during the program with the help of the mentors. How do we do a quick, kind of test and experiment, so by the time they actually show to the community, they have some traction. So I do think that we provide the support to the founders to actually get the first steps. If you have already gotten your product to the market, we provide the support for access to market and getting the right meeting in place, that could come faster.
Yep.
If you have figured this out, then we do provide the support in like figuring out what's your next journey. So we're trying to become more company focused rather than, yes, not just a cohort, focused at the end of the day.
That's really nice.
Yeah,
And I think also I mean, before I like continue, I think this something like Angel Unlocked is so important because building the community around us is also going to make us stronger, so to speak. And the Angels,
absolutely.
maybe the very early stage is kind of a missing link that's not as strong as it could be in the region. And so it's really cool that you're investing in that, as well as, of course, the later stage, which also needs more, I
You'll be
think.
you'll be
So
happy to hear that most of these angels do invest in a lot of our companies as well.
nice.
So
Yeah,
I think
exactly. I
part of
mean,
it is like building that goodwill as well, and the common kind of understanding, for all of us. And at the end of the day, we are the closest to the angels, by the way, because we're mostly the first or the second check.
Very early.
So the
Yeah.
chances are higher that my actually co-investor is the angel rather than the institutional VC,
Yeah.
right? So this became an important thing that for us to do, and the number of angel investors in Saudi in particular is increasing by the second.
Nice.
Like most of the companies get their first checks from their angels, friends, and family rather than from the VCs, at the early days, and it's very important to actually focus on kind of the mindset, of this
Absolutely.
important
I mean,
segment as well.
exactly. Because like the traditional way they would think is, I'll take 50% of the company, for the capital or something like that. They don't think like angels in the startup world, and
Absolutely.
you're
Absolutely.
educating
And
the
it's
market.
changing a lot with the two efforts because I think founders are becoming more educated. They understand their rights,
Exactly.
they understand their legal documents, they understand. And we always say, no matter how sophisticated you are, always revisit. Every document needs, we always say, not every safe is safe, right? Meaning that when you sign the safe, if a couple of clauses in the safe were changed, then somebody circulated this, not everyone will take the time, as you know, to sit and read what was done and what was altered. There's an assumption that this is exactly the same document that's uploaded, yeah, but it's not always the case. So we do focus in both the accelerator and the program for angels and VCs on the legal component, and
Got
understanding
it.
that, because this is the exciting part of, yes, investing and being part of a company and working with the founders, but there's the piece that nobody talks about, which is the legal setup, what has been done, what has been signed, what is the impact on the company today, what is the impact on the company later. And founders at the very beginning don't focus on that. They actually focus on, they say they think it's fine and it will be amended, but hey,
Yeah.
these are documents you've signed. It's gonna hunt you probably till the last day if it's not done correctly. So yeah, this is just another thing that we always like to
Yeah,
flag.
and one sees that like in Series A, where you have to revisit everything that happened in the past and try to fix it because it wasn't done right in the first place, and the cost and everything and time. So yeah, I mean, it's great that you're doing that. And so I mean, going back to the structure, so 500 MENA has the fund related to it, and then there's an accelerator program in Saudi, which for the whole region, and that's
For the whole
now the
region.
only one running, right? Or
Yes.
are there
It's the
other
only
like
investment accelerator running. And then there is
right?
in Egypt, we have
Mm-hmm.
boot camps, which is we have the seed boot camp and we have the scale up boot camp. And those are non-investment programs, but it's for the purpose of also participating in building the ecosystem. And we also look at them and we invest out of those. So it becomes a great pipeline for us to understand, which companies are there, what's happening, in a market. And I think markets like Egypt, is a huge market. It's true there
Mm-hmm.
were some of the issues around the devaluation and so many other, kind of stuff, but it remains Egypt as an important market that has a lot of amazing founders that are building great companies, that we're seeing in the market. And we do see that value and that importance of this market. So that's how this program came about in
Got it.
Egypt. So but the only investment program is the Sanabil 500 Mina Seed Accelerator. That's the flagship one
Got it.
for the region.
Wonderful. And how do you like? How do you guys make decisions on who to invest to? Is it each local team kind of makes a decision, or is there a regional investment committee where things proceed to that? How do you make the decision?
So So today, as you know, in terms of deal sourcing, we have the general application, and we are all very active in events and conferences, whether to participate or to speak or to go find. And we also have a lot of referrals from our own founders as well. And now we have the boot camps that could be another, kind of deal sourcing mechanism. So there's three partners on this fund. It's myself, my partner Abdurrahman Jifri, and then a third partner in the US, Beji Yang. So we do have someone in the US, and we have two persons in Saudi today. And this is basically, those are the partners on the team. And how do we make the decision? As you can see, we do, it's a mix of like looking at the global benchmarks and like assessing what's happening, what models have 500 invested in previously, what is happening in the rest of the market. But also there's our local experience as well and what we see today. It's like we see something, we look at it, we go, after it. I'll give you an example of a company that may not look at something, global, but we do believe that this is a model that could go actually to a different stage. So we just invested in a company last quarter called Ijari. It's rent now, pay later, right? Ijari
Hmm.
just announced the
Interesting.
close last. Yeah, yeah. So again, what does that even mean? Yeah. So in Saudi, most of the rentals are done annually. And if at best, you'll find 6 months. We don't have monthly rentals, right? And the thought process behind the company was there's a lot of people, younger ones, mid management, you want to keep some of the liquidity with you. You want to travel, you want to invest, you want to do this. If you pay ahead of time, you're basically allocating a huge amount of equity now. So at the end of the day, this came up, from someone who was in the UK who actually faced a similar problem, Yazid, one of the founders, and they were like,
Hmm.
how big is this problem? And they started to look, and it's interesting that this is not just a regional problem. This problem do exist actually in Korea, do exist in Africa, do exist in other parts of the world, and there aren't many solutions, around the globe, that are doing it in an efficient way. And they thought of
Mm.
launching this in Saudi. We invested last quarter as part of the pre-seed, and their seed round was closed 2 weeks ago with $15 million.
Wow, that was
dollars.
quick.
It's a mix of debt and equity, and the investors in that company and the cap table is a mix of banks and debt providers and regional actually VCs. And I think this is maybe one of the examples of companies that we need local people actually, within the international funds in order to have that collaborative, the benchmarking slash, what's happening in the region, what regulations are changing, what regulation is actually, not moving as fast as it could, what seems to be hot, but it may not. And as you know, it's a game of like you do your best and the best of your ability in doing your due
Yeah,
diligence, not knowing, what we all wish we have that crystal ball. We all wish to have it for the
yeah.
investments, but this is an example of something that is quite unique, to certain countries, but not necessarily, something that will become
Mm.
so obvious, globally. But it's that mix of the two of us, yes.
Nice. And you make decisions unanimously, all three of you as partners, or does every
We
part you
do
can like kind
we
of?
vote.
Oh, interesting.
We
Yeah.
have voting, but we also agree at sometimes. I mean, sometimes there are deals that are very obvious, and
Uh
sometimes
huh.
there are deals where you see us taking more than one meeting. It's like I'll
Mm.
get more DT, I'll get more validation. Let's look at this model and do a comparison. So some of it gets decided obviously within the investment committee where all the data points are available. Some of it actually could take a little bit of like, especially if you have a partner that's super passionate, about the deal and believes highly of it, you want to try to show the others, at least if you cover all, I would say all the questions that were not actually clear, within the
Mm.
interview and then within the discussion, then we actually would vote on the deals, after that. But at the end of the day, I do say we do actually talk and talk a lot and bring a lot of data points, and like everyone tries to actually look at it, but we're very also founder driven, I think, in so many ways.
Mm.
So if we believe in these founders, and their possibilities, even if the offering was not as evident, at the beginning, can we really trust that they will take the company to the next level? What can we do in terms of adding this visibility towards the founders? Do we see, any signs in the country that's actually going towards that way? And then understanding how realistic the founder is. At the end of the day, there's people that come with the right background and the right experience, and no matter what happened in the company, they will know how to bounce back, with another solution, with pivoting and all of these stuff. And honestly, I think if you ask any investor, they'll tell you, I wish I can assess this, from the first meeting or from the first, kind of interaction, because that is what we're trying to sense besides all the questions that comes in the company is
Yep.
how do I assess the ability of the founder and the rest of the team dynamics, and will they be able to talk together and understand, and what do they provide? Do they have a little bit of clarity? Will they not have clarity at some point? What would they do, at that time? And I think this is one of the biggest things, that you need to be able to gain some experience towards assessing, if you can start sensing that, at least, in one way or another. You see it also in the interaction of the founder with you. How do they
Mm-hmm.
communicate with you? How do they talk to you? There are impressive founders that you feel, oh my God, it's like, how is this even happening? How is there's a human being who operates in this efficiency? And then on the other hand, there are founders that I need to follow up with. I need to call and say, what happened with this? What happened with that? And I don't know. And again, I wouldn't say it defines a good founder from another who's not really committed. But at the end of the day, you're trying to get the sense of your ability, at least the chemistry of collaboration, and how can we talk to each other later on? Will we be able, if I want to help you and you're not allowing me to help you, how am I going to penetrate that? We're not always at the same time. We're not always sitting together. We're not
Yeah.
talking every day. So I think we try to test that in a very short time. And Ali, it's the most difficult thing to do with the timeline we have before the accelerator,
Oh yeah.
because we have the shortest time of like a few months to actually choose, 9 to 12 companies to invest in, right? So it's a
Out of how
lot of,
many, by the way?
uh, the average is around 400, no, 400, 500. This is what we look at from
500
applications.
startups.
Sometimes, yeah, sometimes it gets to 700, 800. It's like, this is the range. But again, we do have, the reason the number looks like that is we actually are open throughout the whole year, Ali. So if I tell you the whole year, the number will change, because this
Right.
is from time to time. This is the batch we chose to select from. So we keep the applications open throughout the whole year. And then there is a time where we say, all right, from this time till this time, we're going to try to get all the companies that we want. And then we announce online, we say, all right, this is the cutoff date for this batch, but you can continue applying and we'll consider you for the next one due to time
Mm.
constraints of not being able to vet, all the companies that will come after the cutoff date. So that's one. And the second one is the external piece, which is honestly most of the companies that you will see in our batches come from that
Mm-hmm.
one, not just from the application, which is the piece that come from founders' referrals. We believe that this founder actually would fit here, they would benefit from that, they're looking for this. And the ones that we see, publicly and we could meet, it's very, very interesting how, when I look at every batch and say, oh my God, how many came from the application, how many came from here, how many came from here. So
Yep.
it is quite interesting, honestly. I remember one time I was at STEP conference. I was leaving to a flight after my panel, met a founder from Oman, and we exchanged numbers quickly. And I said, let's talk after I come back. He said, you will see my co-founder in Oman. And I laughed and I left and I got into the plane. And then it happened that after I spoke, they took us to Omantel and there was an exhibition of 4 companies as his partner was there. So it's like, this is not coincidence. Come, let's talk, and I talked to them. We went back to Saudi, we met, and we ended up investing. So sometimes it's not the easiest touch point and it's not the most
Yep.
obvious. It's just about really, founders follow through, we
It's the
follow
hustle.
through, we become attentive, and the hustle. Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
pretty much, how it happened. In terms of vetting the companies and all of these stuff, literally they go through applications. Sometimes it's the applications are not filled, fully. So we do either ask them to fill it again, or we just don't accept at that stage, because this is the first ask, is just to give us this information in an application. We haven't met, we don't know you. Please fill it up and give us the best of your ability of explaining that. And then if they pass this, they go to a second interview,
Mm-hmm.
with one of our team members, and our associate. And then there's another interview with a partner. And then we would take them for a short interview with all the 3 partners as well. So this actually happens pretty quickly. So you'll see founders getting a call. What are you doing tomorrow? You have this meeting, scheduled. So
You better be
so
ready.
this is how it is. Yeah, yeah, this is how it is. And we try to close as soon as possible, obviously. So we close our investments and we do give the offers prior to the program. So everyone who makes it to the accelerator have already received an investment offer. So there is no
Nice.
vetting that happens in the program. Yeah.
Cool. So let me maybe I'd like to change tacks to something on more personal slash professional note. I watched your talk in TEDx Kaust.
Yeah,
I was really touched by your story as a child with a serious illness and going through all that. And,
yeah.
I was wondering how that has affected how you lead your life.
I lead my life with a smile, Ali, every day. There's nothing that has no solution, and there's nothing that is the end of the world. As long as we have the hustle, we give the means, we do the job, we do the work, we go all the way and try to empathize as much as possible. I lead with, hopefully I have all and I've considered everything that I can do in the best of my ability. It's almost like an oath between me and myself that I will give the chance to everybody to express who they are, what they are, and that's not just in the startup world, but also in my personal life. And I will give every reason to understand, until it no longer, you know, it's possible because the person is not giving me the chance, to actually do so. So I think I always repeat that particular word that I got out of my, my cancer experiences. Resilience is something that we don't realize the power of until we experience it multiple times, and you start exploring and experiencing beauty in life, and beauty in relationships,
Mm,
and beauty in discovery, and beauty in solutions, right? That's why probably I would say, if anyone told me that, your disease will be the point and the connectivity to my career today, which is I see a relationship between entrepreneurship and between what I have experienced three times growing up, in the sense of, like, you do think sometimes that these are the end of the life and the end of the road. And then I've seen the power of my parents, my community, my mother's friends, my colleagues in the school, and how everything brought me back to normal life. And I actually excelled in schools, not just because I was alone. Maybe it was, if it was in my mind and I was alone trying to do things, it would have been as enjoyable. It would have been as easy, right? And then
mm,
moving forward, I always tell founders, this journey shouldn't be taken alone, and everyone should know that. And
mm,
maybe I always go into, yes, we actually need to consider the problem, the solution, the technicalities of it, but you also need to, experience, who are you? Why are you doing what you're doing today? Who's going to do that with you? Who's going to support you? Who would you go with? Whom do you want? Even the investors, who are you going to take with you in this journey? And they're going to accompany you, in that.
mm.
So I think, that, yeah, that experience is a title of resilience, hustleness, and
Yeah.
waking up, being grateful every day for the life I have and for the people that I meet. That gives me these different lives. I think we as investors get to live the life that founders are living without doing it ourselves, as you know. And they allow us to experience, the ups and downs of it. And hopefully we become the best, in backing and supporting.
Yeah, so it's really about optimism too. It's a beautiful story, and yeah, I mean, and you decided not to become a doctor after that, or did it? How did how did that change your career options?
You really went deep, huh?
Uh,
Um, I See, it's there's nothing that I did. I decided to not become a doctor. I think being a medical doctor was one of the dreams that I have. I still appreciate and value every medical doctor that I see, and hope that everyone knows how important is what they do, especially the ones that lead with empathy towards their patients.
yeah.
But I think it was not a decision, rather than, how many times would I need to do that if I get cancer again? And I think the thought got into my head at that time a lot, right? So because I
Mm.
got it three times, the first time I was 11, then I was, around 14, 15, then I was around 19. And I think it was hard to accept the fact
Wow.
that there could be a time. Not every your university will wait for me. Not every degree will wait for me. Not everything. And I was feeling tired. It was just a physical, pain. And and I think that part was like, maybe I need to take a break and just understand that. My mom was with me. My mom was the one who was like, why don't you do something, that could be just lighter, and then you can figure things out later. And that's how I got into getting a degree in
Education.
education back in the days, and that was in 1995, and I
Yeah.
graduated first honor. I was actually, offered a job, to teach, and like, so I think for me, it was always about challenging the status quo, about the phase that I was in, the place I was in, and how do I get to the best of, the best, how do I stretch the experience to the maximum? I think this
Hmm.
is something, and it's a trait about people. You can choose to live at the edge of it. You can choose
Hmm.
to actually put a step in it, and you can choose to go all around the circle and like run everywhere and maybe even break and go somewhere out. And for me, it was about that buzzing, and like how to experience life to its fullest.
Hmm.
And maybe I took that and I brought it to my career, honestly. I'm not that great socially, unfortunately, in my own private
Really?
life.
Hmm.
Not really. I work a lot, actually. You know, I would rather be around events and stuff, my own personal time is the alone time, is the quiet time.
Hmm.
So people would assume I'm a social butterfly. It's actually not really. I am a social butterfly in my work, in the conferences, in the places I want to be in. When I see founders, I'm almost like, just jumping, and people know that about me, right? I'm just excited. I want to talk to this. I want to talk to that. I want to see it. Can we meet? When can we meet? And my schedule is mostly full, with all of these stuff. Plus, I do prioritize learning. So every now and then there is a new thing that's happening in venture that I want to be part of. I'm looking into AI, I'm looking into data structures because most of my companies are actually doing that. So there's always something that's taking a lot of time, but if I do get my own time, that's definitely going to be a very quiet, alone time of
Yeah. Yeah.
reflection.
Makes sense to balance things
Yeah,
out.
yeah,
Yeah, and it's
absolutely.
interesting that you ended up starting in education because I always feel like teaching is like a superpower because if you're good at teaching, then you're good at communicating ideas. You're good at being confident with others, and you're good at understanding the different levels of thinking, for different people and talking to them. So I think
Yeah.
also education is a very formative kind of thing. I almost wish I had worked as a teacher at some point. Anyway,
It's one of the most difficult, Ali, to actually
yeah.
tackle and to become so good at it. And it's interesting, even 20 years later, I've met some of my students in different positions, and they're like, "Oh, you taught us at this stage." And I'm like, my heart goes like, oh man, like life have passed, and it's not like I never realized. I do appreciate, how I started. I actually was a trainer for a very long time, and I still enjoy teaching, and I do enjoy passing the knowledge. And if there's anything that I would tell anybody, if there's one single advice that I give anyone, just pass the knowledge. You will get the rewards one day, in some shape or form, right? Just pass something you highly believe in, and you never know. I've got a lot of founders come back to me maybe in 2 3 years. Maybe the first startup didn't work, then later on you told us this and that, and sometimes you say something and you don't really count how it could impact the person in
How
front of
influential
you.
it is.
But
Yeah.
you never know. You just say it, but somebody comes back and say, just that thought have made me shift, and do this and do that.
Yep. Yep.
So, and because I've done so much in my life, like over 24 years, like I've worked in so many things, and the shift is massive. Like if you tell someone she moved from being a kindergarten teacher to, managing partner in a fund, it's a stretch, for a lot of
Yeah.
people to digest. But I always say there's also the back end. Like I've done the work of it. I've done the,
Of course.
the study, the work, the actually going all the way to get the best knowledge over a course of, more than 10 years. um, but that gives you a message that possibilities are big. And even if I want to reflect on a founder, you need to keep an open mind of everything, even in the product that you're doing today and the service, that they could be more into it than what you're seeing today. They could be, but you have to listen, and you have to see, and you have to feel, and you have to allow your senses to be there. And I think that is the most difficult thing for founders, when you love someone so much and you want to do exactly what you think is true, but customers are giving you mixed signals, and the way they want to interact with it is different, and they have other alternatives that they seem to be so attached to. And you have to understand all of that, and on top of it, you have to balance your financials and the people, and convince convince the team that this is the right way and maintain them. So yeah, going back to, I think teaching is a good skill to actually help you just understand the different, backgrounds and how people work. But we keep learning, Ali. It's never an ending, quest, obviously, of understanding people. But yeah,
Surely. So yeah, I mean, from the personal to maybe to the regional, you've obviously, like, your scope is regional scope, uh, and you worked a little in Dubai, like for 2 or 3 years, I think.
yeah.
But you're basically based in Saudi, and you've been focusing there. So what do you think are like the specific characteristics of the Saudi ecosystem that maybe outsiders don't realize?
All right. There's so many, obviously, of what's happening today, but I would say an huge market you cannot ignore or deny. Like,
Mm,
think of a market that didn't have so many sectors that were unlocked before, and now it's unlocking and waiting for someone to come and provide. So you do have these definite opportunities in the market that are yet, to be utilized by the ones who come, whether from outside or inside the kingdom. So I think the abundance of opportunities is definitely one thing. It's not a saturated market. Like in the US, there are certain sectors that are definitely saturated by some of the startups and the corporates and all of this. It's hard to penetrate. The barriers are really, really, really high. But I think you still have, possibilities in some of the markets actually in Saudi today. So I think it's just you keep your eyes open as a founder and really understand what's happening on the ground. Do not make judgments while you're outside. If there's a sector you want, you have to be on the ground. You have to ask the people. You have to find who worked on it. You have to know the nuances, and all of these stuff, because there's highly influenced by culture of how people do business, in Saudi. So you have to understand the cultural nuances as well about this place in order to be, accepted, and in order to be, actually able to operate and to work in that market. So I would say opportunities, but understand the cultural nuances, obviously, of how to do business in this region or in Saudi in particular. Second thing, I think regulations definitely have started to move and change faster than any other time. So there is a lot of the regulations that we've seen have been the result of founders pushing for the first precedence, right? So that
mm,
means that the regulator is open, towards doing this. I'll give a quick example. We have a company, Lendo. It was in lending, and it was one of the early companies that worked in, with the regulators and that, the founder Osama, and they've done an amazing job, laying actually the path for the future companies that are coming in that particular lending space. And many others have done that as well in Saudi. So I think that is definitely the regulator advantage is good. I'm not going to say it's the easiest, but it is actually moving in a very positive direction with the ones that are willing to put the work actually for it. The third one is it's a young market, so you
mm.
still have the possibility to actually change a lot of the behaviors of the people via introducing new companies into it. So when you talk about a country that has, 85%, and I'm sure that this kind of statistics have changed, are under the age of 30 or 35, then you're talking about, a very particular demographic over here, and
Yeah.
it needs its own, kind of articulations. And again, you need to see this, yes, and approach it in the right way. There's abundance of dry powder, in the kingdom, whether from not just VCs, actually talking about family offices, talking about angels, which you see it in the size of the check by angels. Like, you see checks of angel investments, in some of the cap tables that ranges between $100,000 to $1 million, which means there is interest towards tech, there's interest towards companies, there's interest toward, it's just about finding the opportunities. Are they all unlocked? Not really. But I do say, even, there's a lot of funds that come to the region and they want to fundraise as well. And we always say, yes, there is dry powder, but I think there is still Do we have enough precedents within technology companies that enable, some of these type of entities to believe that I can allocate, this amount and put it in the highest and the riskiest asset class, possible, and knowing that it's a family money, for example, right? So I
mm,
think we still need to see, more examples of companies that have scaled, that have reached certain levels, and we need a good number. Like now we're hearing a story or two every year, right? I think you need to hear, like, we need to see 10, 15, 20 companies, that are making it in
mm,
order to become mainstream and in order to attract and unlock, that cash as well. And maybe another one is the possibilities of, I think the movement in the market is very fast, meaning few years back, if you were to say banks will actually look at companies, it would have been something that nobody would even discuss, right? In this year alone, you've heard news of acquisitions, you've heard news of investments, you've heard news of funds that are actually created by banks, to invest in technology companies, not necessarily fintech, but it has a fintech element into it. Departments that are being set up. So I think, technology is becoming the most contagious thing, that everybody wants to be part of today. But there's
mm,
also a bit of cautiousness, around the movement, and how are we actually getting there. But the general sentiment is enthusiasm. How many markets you can talk about today, and you say that you will feel the enthusiasm the minute you put your foot in the airport. You will see that there is something happening, something in, I wouldn't say it's just in the air, but something is in the air. And then you see the possibilities as you get into the events, as you go and meet people, as you go and understand really what other infrastructural elements that are happening. You see a city shifting. Like if I start by mentioning sectors that will be booming, infrastructures like and construction alone, in a
mm.
city that's being
Yeah,
actually,
huge.
you know, it's happening everywhere and it's happening really fast. So there's room for technologies that will be utilized, there. The second thing is just all these localized kind of solutions that people are using for, to handle all of these products. So the buy now, pay later is not just, you know, uh, something that's born today and will disappear. As this generation changes, and leads, there will be other needs. So definitely pieces are coming, I would say, together in a good
Mm,
stage, but we will still see, the ups and downs in the market. Like in the last quarter, there was a decreased amount of funding across the whole region, and now, people are announcing new funds. Everybody's closing, it's just, it seems like the sentiment is going back now towards looking at deals again. So one thing that I can tell you that we've noticed is that the number of deals have gotten less, in the past, kind of quarter and until today. So it's the
mm,
number that we're seeing is not as much, but there's better quality of founders. There's much more assertiveness about understanding what venture means, and I'm making a very, very sane decision to start the company, to leave my job, to give this a go. And government incentives in Saudi alone, not just for Saudis, for all anyone who is actually doing venture in Saudi, is a lot. Like I can mention only a program. One of these programs, NTDP, so the National
mm,
Technology Development Fund, and what they offer. So there's a program called Relocate. It's for any company that's in a Series A that's relocating to the Saudi market, and they take them all the way from. You don't need to really think what does it mean to relocate to Saudi, from your own movement into the country to actually helping you with all the legal kind of setups, getting your CR until you get your bank account, subsidizing your tech talent, getting you introduced to the market, getting an understanding your funding. All of that is done by a government program. That's one product. Imagine all
yeah.
the others. So you're coming to a place that is actually definitely sure about, pushing the boundaries, to have more technologies actually set up, and they have them when we have the market for it in Saudi. And then you have even the government fund of funds as well, that is investing in technology, but probably later stage outside. And eventually it's going to start looking at inside, and the regional kind of solutions. So I think this is what I feel when I ask founders about that. These are some of the reasons why you'll find this as an interesting and exciting market, obviously.
So dynamic, young, techno optimists. government supported kind of ecosystem. Great.
Absolutely.
And how do I mean you? I'm sure you meet many of the global investors who come to the region, visiting and stuff. How do they see the region, in your opinion? Is it just like a barrel of money for them, or do they see other?
I think there's all different types of international investors. There's the ones that still don't see the region as an opportunity. They feel it's just, they don't know a lot about it, obviously. So there's that
Yeah.
segment that still exists. And then you do have the segment that has a full belief because they came, they visited, they've invested, they've seen returns, and they sent people to live in the region. And now they look at opportunities. And some of them didn't even fund from the region the first year, but then they actually got money after they proved that they're investing. And to me,
Mm.
that's one of the best actually profiles that you can
Yeah.
see, in the region here, which is the believer one. And then you have in the middles the ones that hear about the opportunity, they see the movement, they're intrigued, but they're still not sure whether they should allocate a fund or maybe start testing with one or two deals and see where is it going to take us. Maybe start co-investing. So we get a lot of people that say, how about we look at your deals that you guys actually have invested and we can actually co-match, what you're doing. And
Right.
at least this is a de-risk. We don't need to do the investment of setting up an office and having people and all of this stuff. Then you have another type that actually hire venture partners on the ground. So they at least have possibilities, and an eye to the events and like to have presence and all of these stuff.
Yeah.
And you have also another type that go directly and just want the fundraise. And they don't want probably
Yeah.
the limitation of invest in Saudi, invest in MENA, and all of this stuff. And that's no longer a valid option if you're actually just that, unless you're actually getting funding, you're actually quite an well achieved, I would say, VC that have done the
A16Z,
results.
Sequoia, something like that. Yeah.
Then yes, it makes sense for some of the fund of
Of
funds,
course.
and all of these family offices to actually invest for their own personal returns, and that's a very valid option actually until today. But just starting and coming, and expecting to be funded, there's so many that are actually coming today, there's so many funds
Mm.
that are being so for all around the world, so it's no longer that. And I
Yeah.
think there is maturity in the region to understand the good opportunity, the one that is, I think reading people is becoming more clearer nowadays than how it used to be
That's the learning curve, huh?
for all of us.
Uh, yeah, exactly. So, okay, I mean, these last couple of years globally have been very hard on startups in terms of exits markets and, getting that DPI back to the LPs and things like that. And LP ventures in venture have been like decreasing globally. How have you been seeing this part of the equation in the region? You said you closed the fund recently, so
So again, yes, this happened, and we know the reason of why this happened actually in the past year, and all the dryness in, the most of the VC funds, everyone who was raising their second, third, fourth, fifth fund actually were expecting higher ones. Then they closed and they settled with certain amounts. There's other that made first close and then they continued raising as they were investing. We've seen all of those. Some of it is really, really good funds, that had very good kind of exits, and results, and yeah, good TVPIs, and like they're doing great, but not necessarily that everyone, was actually still in belief, of all of these stuff. And I was looking at one of the podcasts the other day, and one of the VCs was mentioning that, even the exit windows globally is becoming really tighter and tighter. It's used to be, yes, public markets, listing and all of these stuff. And that's
yeah,
now kind of a thing that not everyone is looking at as the most, exciting part. But, where is private equity? That was his ask. It's like maybe there's an opportunity for those to get better prices today globally, right? If they want to
yeah,
get into the game. And not all PE firms are very excited about what venture has been interested in, but maybe they have a leverage to look at the deals and now tweak, and give their own influence. So there's a lot that definitely happened globally. And there's what I've seen also from some of the fellow investors is like, you know, what if we couldn't achieve our own DPIs, that our LPs are expecting? Then how do we become more creative in achieving those? Meaning we curate, how the exits will look like. Maybe you do a
Mm.
partial kind of exit, maybe, but just trying to return some of the funds at a certain period that after a few years passed, you want to show evidence that you are able to return. And I think this is the pressure, like all these elements wasn't pressuring most of the VCs, as they were going. And the other part is like the struggle that the startups had. So it was not just VCs not being able to fundraise, it was startups not being able to close. And we've seen so many that actually have just ended
Yeah.
the journey, right? How is that reflected, into the region? There was, I wouldn't say that people stopped investing because of that or any of this, but I would say that the days of spending high on CAC and doing great marketing and showing no profits and no money and revenue coming in have been over. I don't think these are the days that we're going to see a lot of. Everyone is asking for healthier unit economics. It has to make sense because after 2021, as you know rightly, Ali, it's like everyone was okay with no revenue, no clarity, in some of the business models, as long as there is exciting founders and exciting offerings. And a lot of companies have actually suffered because of the higher valuation, because of the higher customer
Exactly.
acquisition cost, and because of all of this stuff, and then they couldn't turn it around, right? um, and they received multiple rounds of financing, but unfortunately that didn't lead into what should have been done at the end of the day. But today I think that's why I was telling you there's a bit of cautiousness, but also there's a bit of learning and maturity, into the region and towards what we do. And most of the funds in the region, except two or three, are actually new funds that are probably three
Mm.
years old only, or second or fourth year. So most of the VCs actually in Saudi in particular are raising the second fund. So you're talking about a very, very still, kind of nascent, market that's still yet to see the success stories and the returns of the funds, and hear the big kind of narratives, around that. So so I think, as some of these funds have actually shown the exits in some of the big market, and some of the big companies, and those are the ones that actually got, the green tick, and, they've done well, they know how to choose, they've actually led the company all the way, towards that. So there's a couple of like companies that Tabi, Tamara, in the early days, it wasn't really long time ago, but again, the success that these companies have made in the markets are actually huge. Prior to that, it was obviously Kareem, but then you have also a lot of the regional funds actually were part of this, and now they're back actually to bring this knowledge and know-how to the market. So I think the market is shaping nicely, with a lot of
Yep.
definitely bringing, positive signs, and the international money coming in is also another good actually indicator, because it shows that there is also variety of like access to funding. And the third point is, as we progress, we see the need for debt financing, right? So it was just venture, 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 high dilution for the founders. There was no other way. Loans of the bank are not accessible. Today, you'll see everybody talking about debt and what are the possibilities for debt today for a company, and who's eligible to it, who can actually get it, and is it possible to curate a round, that could be a mix of the two in order to preserve, the equity of the founders and make sure that they have room, in the future. And I do believe, in the region now you have, for example, Partners for Growth is one of the funds that's actually have given a lot of debt to so many of the regional startups, and that's going to attract other debt financing. And we're already seeing other European and like Indian companies that are interested now, who's done their own success, but now they see the interest in the region. Plus LPs started to look at investing in debt vehicles as well. So venture debt is becoming something that everybody's looking at. And there are startups that started to also provide debt, so they're competing with the debt. So
Yeah.
most of venture debts, they would provide you a minimum of 3 to 4 or 5 million dollars, right, in kind of in debt. So there are other startup companies today that are coming and saying, hey, I'll give you the few $100,000, and like smaller micro amounts and all these stuff.
Shorter
So
term.
again, this, yeah, very short to term, but guaranteed, returns also for both of them. The interest rate becomes actually is the component where everybody, kind of play. Um, and that's how it is now. So that shows you in 4 to 5 years, you're still seeing new products, new
Yeah, things are still
services, new
developing.
regulated. It's still being developed, right? So startup studios in the past year, man, like how many startup studios have we seen in the last 2 years? Again, not validating or disvalidating, the model, but there's a lot that's happening. So there's still time for this to produce the type of companies who's going to invest, with what type of money does it, attract. Um, but again, that is good. At the end of the day, I told you, back 2013 and seeing the pace of things, and now looking at 2024 and the pace of, all of these things happening, it's definitely it's an amazing time.
All right. So, Amel, you've invested in so many startups over the years. If you could go back to your younger investing self and give it advice, what would you tell it?
Yeah. Goodness. All right. To do things faster. If I believe that
Hmm.
this was actually, a deal that I believed in, I would have taken the decision faster,
Hmm.
um, and not to hesitate. I think
Trust your gut, so to
um,
speak.
my gut, and like if I've got all the data points. There's no need to delay, and I try to apply that today in 500, that we become fast responders to the founders, right? Whether by positive or negative, but being faster is definitely one. And I think the second component is basically definitely invest at the beginning, and learn more from the others that have done it before. So today, my relationship with a lot of the investors, if they invested in a certain model that I don't know, I just pick up the phone and like talk about it, really know, and everyone is willing to share. The good, the bad, and everything. I've had the best conversations about reflections on some of the companies. So I shouldn't hold the question. Just go for it, ask the question, pop it, and follow that. Yeah.
Nice. So, there are like different religions in the area of early stage investment in terms of people who swear by traction and others who think the team is everything and product, market size, things like that. I mean, what do you think is most important in early stage investing?
Um, Man, we invest pre-traction, pre-product, pre all of these. I don't have even those to judge most of the time, right? So
Mm,
I have to swear by the founders, at the end of the day,
yeah.
and like how much do they give me? I know it may sound like a cliche to say that, but as a pre-seed investor, that's all what I have most of the time to work with. And then when I get all the knowledge about their understanding of the problem, validating it with the other, I'm literally validating what they told me, right? So I'm evaluating their experience, their timeline, what they have done, what entities they have worked in, why this problem would make a great fit, for these founders. I'm vetting them a lot, and just judge the dynamics, of the team, and like, and all how they are operating with each other. And really I try to assess they're not the over optimistic ones, they're not the ones that are just being extra cautious and they're not going to move fast. They just have the right, I would say, consciousness about what journey they're taking, what is about, that journey. I ask so many questions that founders don't expect me to ask sometimes, and they'll probably be surprised, why they're being asked these questions at the initial
Mm,
time. But I cannot ask you about a problem you did not solve yet, except by what you tell me. I'm going to solve this big why, right? And we're going to dig deeper and we'll see how far you know. But if you tell me this is what I will be building, lovely. I'm also looking at the way you're thinking, but at the end of the day, I don't have anything in my own hand, to judge but them. So so again, yes, definitely the people and their abilities. If we have product and company, we try to assess, their logic of how they approached the journey. Like, how did they get to it? Did they allocate too much to the technology? Did they really take it step by step? Did they, like, there was a company once we invested in that solved the problem, that they're about to build a platform with an Excel sheet, and they sold it, and they made $200,000 just by selling
Nice.
those data through Excel sheets, right? So that was intriguing for me, because if they did that with almost no product and with Excel sheet, what would they do when they have a proper fully fledged, kind of. So I think this is it's you're looking for signals at the early stage, you're looking for a sign.
Yeah.
Obviously, when you have tractions and stuff, it's impressive. When I look at the numbers, I'm like, this is amazing. Like, how did they
Yeah.
do this? And then you go for it. But most of the time, we don't have all of that. It's we have the founders.
Yep. The founders are key. So I saw you in an Atlantic Council event saying that you
Yes.
aim to get a third of the batch, at least, to be female founders. And I
Hmm.
was wondering how successful, I mean, you've been able, I mean, to what extent you've been able to achieve that objective.
We've
Oh, nice.
achieved it. It's
So
not an aim. It's been.
how did you do it? Because a lot of people, they're like, oh yes, but we're not seeing enough like deal flow from female co-founders, etc. How do you do that?
So So at the very beginning, it was not a target, rather than really looking at, the applications and what we're getting. And we found out that at the very initial stages, we found that in every batch is like 10, 12 companies. And we have 2 to 3 companies that are led by women, in a time where everybody says that there isn't enough, deal flow that are coming from female founders. And I think it's impressive to see that, there's definitely, more companies that are being created. But what I'll tell you, where we struggle with that, not all of them come through the applications. We have to see them in events, or somebody would introduce me and say, this amazing, founder is actually working in something like that, or I have to follow, can you introduce me? Can you give me this and that? So I think not it's not that visible to all of us, and there could be so many reasons. There could be so many reasons why they could believe, for example, maybe I'm not ready for funding, or maybe I need to work more, maybe I need to increase my chances. And I think that I always tell women, we like to be perfect all the time, and do the best of the best before even bringing everything, and we don't like to be rejected. And I think that is shared by all humans, that nobody likes rejection, but it's part of our journey, is to understand and listen and hear. And I think a lot of female founders have said they've been faced with a little bit of like some of the stereotypes, or some told them that they're not comfortable of doing this. You'll find that. You will find that everywhere. And basically you will find your fit at some point, right? I've had so many of my amazing female founders, and when they talk, and then the kids would come, or they would run in the back, and it's absolutely fine. And that gives me more validation. If you're mother of 3 and you're building this
Hmm.
and you're making it that far, for me that is more validation of your ability to take this to
Exactly.
the next level. And I think we need more narrative and more stories by female founders that have succeeded and have done actually what it takes in terms of the governance of the company, in terms of having a co-founder, because most of the female founders they start as single founders at the beginning. They're
Mm.
solo at the very early stage, because they want to reach a certain stage of, like, creating what they are aspiring to do. But having someone to support and help is an added value, and having a team is always a plus, right? So I think it's about understanding which kind of companies that needs what kind of
Yeah.
additions to it in terms of team, and what sort of investors will they back you, into that. And when I hear these stories, I say there are so many companies that got financing and they're doing amazing. Like, if I talk about Saudi, one of the companies in 500 Gathering, this company is growing massively. It's like a
Mm.
similar to an Airbnb model, led by a female founder, Latifa. We invested in companies like Spare. This is a fintech company led by an amazing founder. She's doing amazing, working in the closing partnerships and doing. So I do have a lot of stories and a big list of female founders that we've invested in. But I think what's really important to note, that we didn't invest because they're women. We invested because they're
Of
actually
course.
amazing, skillful founders. And I have to say that these actually founders have proven to us more and over and over and over that they are just focusing on the right things and doing what needs to take. And I think this whole assumption, Ali, maybe this is one of my the topics that I don't feel that we can do it justice, because um, everyone has their own thoughts why we don't have enough diversity, within venture. But I say sometimes, is it that, is it the pipeline? Maybe they're doing other, also other kind of stuff that are great, that are amazing. I know a lady who owns a manufacturing facility. It's wonderful. She's doing amazing, right? So if it's a pipeline thing, is it about showing models? Is it about education? Is it about telling go forward? Is it about that? I think there's so much to unpack there. The second thing is, I think we were lucky every time we invest, we've had so many investments, either the applicant is a woman, or the co-founder is a woman actually in that
Yeah.
sector. So it's interesting to see the diversity and its added value. And maybe the third thing I always say, just know your financials, know your legal, ask a lot, don't be shy, to reach out, and just show what it is. And if you have a product market fit, you know, others will come to you and they will invest in you. So I think maybe my first thing, and some people they say I'm crazy about that. I said one of the reasons why I did so many things in life, I've always removed this women, kind of thought. I'm just a person going and trying and moving from one thing to another. And if someone tells me this is for women or for not, I'm more excited to actually go and do it. And I think just taking that, it will always exist. You'll always have the biases. You'll always have all of these stuff, but you can't stop. You just got to keep moving, honestly. But we did achieve the third of the batch, so you'll see our
Nice.
next batch as well.
Yeah. S- so I mean, on a different tack, like on the same subject but a different tack, there's a question submitted by one of our listeners, Iman Isa, and online, and she says, "Do you feel under any kind of pressure when evaluating a woman's startup idea? And do women in general have higher or lower expectations if they know their pitch, will be seen by you?" I don't know what
You mean if
what.
I have,
Oh,
just to understand it, I read it on
um,
LinkedIn, by the way,
uh,
but I didn't understand the last
okay.
part. Does she mean that?
Yeah, exactly.
I just didn't
I,
get the second
I
part of the
think
question.
I think what she's saying is, do women, when they see like a woman on the other side, do they have lower expectations or higher expectations? It's probably a
That
psychological
that
thing.
that should be asked by,
Uh,
if it's for me. No,
yeah,
I look at them as founders. I ask the
same,
same
right? Yeah,
questions. I evaluate the same thing. Even my whole team.
yeah,
We're also a very diversified team in nature, by the way, and that helps.
mm,
Like my
of course,
team is like I have a lot of females and I have a lot of males, so I do have the two sides. So I do feel that we balance when you have a diversified team. It helps, when you're looking at companies, because no one has this kind of prejudice idea of like a particular profile of a founder. And the fact that we focus on the region gives us also another edge. We invest in so many nationalities, and not just
mm,
Arabs. Actually, we
yeah,
have
yeah,
so many nationalities that come. So I think when you have that much frequency of meeting founders, working with founders and other, this actually goes away, and it's reflected in, I would say, in the DNA of my whole team, today, that's sourcing the deals. And maybe that's part of it. That's part of like how comfortable is the culture, within 500 and within the MENA team as well. So no, I don't really
yeah.
differentiate, my dear. Like certain founders, like other founders have spoken to us, so they can tell you.
Yeah. All right. So moving on to the regional, like the deal flow you're seeing, are there any up and coming
Yes.
verticals that you're seeing in the deal flow? Things
So
that you
you
see
can't
more and
ignore
more
applications of
growing?
AI, Ali. Everything has artificial intelligence element into it today. I think the question is, how many of those really solve a real problem? This is what I keep saying. It's like for me, I just want to look at the fit. I want to look at the fit. I want to look at the possibilities moving forward. I want to look at what is it going to do. I always ask the same question. If anyone expects me to dig deeper into the technology and the algorithm, and the data modeling that you're doing, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to have someone else do it after I get convinced with the problem. But I think the best question, as long as it solves a problem, and we can't deny, how fast it will happen, towards all of the data modeling that's being happened today. So definitely that we'll see the applications of AI in all of the sectors, in education, in construction, and every sector that you will see, it's going to be impacted, by AI. InsurTech, we're very happy to see so many companies in actually insurance in a sector that hasn't been disrupted for a very long time. So we've seen a couple of insurance companies, that are actually doing it. We have one in UAE, well, XAI in health. So two difficult things, insurance and health, combined in
Mm.
one company. So um, and it's very interesting. Their performance is really well. So again, two sectors that are very interesting, but they're also underserved in terms of financing. So health will continue to grow due to how we're evolving, in our life. I don't expect that we'll see less technologies in health. We'll see more technologies in health. Yet, I think it's the game of investors, starting to believe in the power of like investing in health, at this stage. And the second thing is obviously, again, a sector that got a lot of money then got no money, which is education. And I think, it just got a peak. And then after that, it was like a huge kind of, drop of like, what sort of education? But I'll tell you why education would be interesting in the coming few years. There's a lot of verticals in education that is making it more unique. So upskilling blue collars, so retailers, hospitalities, and like all of this. So not education in its normal sense. I think more kind of deeper, verticals that we will see a lot in, because all companies do spend on training, they do spend on like doing this and that. How do I do it in a much more efficient, lower cost than other stuff? There's a huge opportunity there. I think a lot in retail, it's the most difficult when you look at all of these technologies, within the smaller kind of ones, but everyone is digitizing. So it's going to come a time where there will be so much to actually look at, within the region in all of these companies. And then financial technology will remain at the top. I think the innovations and the verticals in financial technology are becoming so interesting. So we started with the consumer base. Now you're going to see all the verticals that's going to get into corporates and going to get into SMEs with its own kind of final lines. And I used to say that the products actually touched, kind of the surface. Today you will see more depth into the verticals of it. Yeah, very much deeper. Like we have Reachware, they work with most of the retail to unify the communications channels, and the intake of data. Very back end. No one will see such a company. But then eventually, as they do this, they realized all the needs that are coming, and oh my God, they have great tractions that are coming here and there. So again, it's like the connectivities that happens in the back end that touches a certain big market, and the list goes on, I think, within that. But there's a lot of markets that are still barely, scratching the surface when it comes to that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's great, and that's another reason for optimism. And I wanted to ask you also. I mean, you're on the board of the Saudi VC and PE Association, as well as the Middle
Yeah.
East VC Association. What are these associations focusing on in the next couple of years?
Okay, so associations in general, the Saudi one, Venture Capital and Private Equity Association. The reason for it was there is, venture space is being created, and it started a few years back. So it started as the sector was being shaped. And the idea was if there is a new sector that's coming up, there will be a lot of questions. There will be a lot of lobbying that needs to happen. There will need to be a voice of when you're in a new
Mm,
thing, you will experience new things. So who's going to communicate that to the government? Who's going to
yeah.
communicate that among the VCs? Who's going to talk about this and that? Some of it even structural and regulatory aspects. Some of it is about education, about the stage that you're going to. Some of it is about getting to know each other and like getting the right connectivities. So literally, that was the essence of it, is just to have an umbrella for a sector that is yet evolving with people that have done it first, that sit on that board, because the previous board was actually literally the board of some of the people that that have done the first VCs, in Saudi. So those are the people that came together and have done it. We're actually the second board now in the life of the association, and that's literally the reason why we do. You'll see a lot of lobbying and a lot of education and a lot of connectivity and a lot of like bringing the voice of the VCs to, the other voice. So that's VCPA. And then you have the MEFCA, the Middle East. I just joined recently. So MEFCA is a more of like a bigger one. So it's Middle East, focused. It's based in UAE. Very exciting group of like in the board, and the idea now is to actually provide that as well, to the rest of the Middle East. And there's another component as well, which is how many VCs internationally are coming to the region? Where would they go? Like, how do I learn about this? How do I learn about who to meet? How do I learn about what to do and all of these stuff? So that's the second one. The third one, the link with the corporates and with the governments, again, it's a similar cause. Like, how do I bridge the voice and like bring this and that? So there is a summit that happens for MEVCA every year. The last summit was quite interesting. I got a lot out of it. We talked, I think last year it was about the some of the banks, support, and the collaboration, the CVCs and family offices. So there was interesting people coming together, bringing and voicing out, what they're thinking about. And then there was a lot of good, positive discussions that, definitely will be hopefully fruitful for our own portfolio. So I think associations in general and globally have a similar mandate: connectivity, lobbying, education, bringing everyone together to share the same voice. And it's true, you can go yourself if you have the connectivity, you can go and do it. But imagine if you go and voice something and say, we're 200 VCs, we have the same thing, it's real, it definitely changes that. And the other part in Saudi, which is really interesting, if there is something, because now most of the government offices know about the association, if there is a regulatory kind of scheme that is being developed that has touch, it gets actually shared with the association. Is this, what are your thoughts, what are you doing? So super exciting, and super useful, definitely, as things evolve in the kingdom. So that's basically what we do, when it comes to these boards.
And maybe, we've had such a huge conversation, and I still have so much to ask, but I think it's time to wind down to in respect for your time. So maybe I'll ask some quick questions. The first is,
Sure.
which book do you like to recommend to others most?
In life or in venture?
Both. We can have more than one.
One of my favorites is Start With Why. I love this book. It's
Yeah.
a classical, it's very straight to the point. And again, another life one, What I Wish I Knew When I Was 20. It was written by a Stanford professor. And the whole book talks about, asking questions, trying, and about experimenting. And it has to do with innovation and stuff. So those are two simple reads. They're very iconic. I have a couple of copies, of them. And in venture, obviously, my starting book was always about anyone who wants to start. It's the most iconic venture deals. So everyone knows
Venture
the
deal.
book.
Yeah.
It's highly
Yeah.
educational. It's a textbook, so you can
Yeah.
select, you can choose what to read. But if you're getting into venture, you must take a look actually at that. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. And how do you unwind and how do you stay energized?
I got asked that question, last week by global shapers in a session. It's like, how do you're always very hyper, you're always very like everywhere and all of these stuff. And I think if you ask me, I don't get a lot of winding down, but let's say talk about the day. I mean, the end of the day. Try at least at the end of the day, just, to come back home, turn off the lights, really, really dimmed, try to just think, listen to music, started to play piano, even if I do it for 10
Oh,
minutes,
nice.
I'm not the best at it, but I would say I needed something that can challenge me mentally, but at the same time, it has beauty, and grace to it. And I think nothing can compete with piano playing, at the end of the day. I don't get to learn a lot. My tutor came a couple of times and then I couldn't because I had meetings, but it's one thing I play with, every now and then, and just reflect on the day and make sure that I have my piece and my closing, and tomorrow is another day and I'm going to start again. So I do review my calendar the night before, organize my day. I can't have a random day. So I do actually look at my day ahead of time. So when I go to bed, I know what I'm going and to do and who I'm meeting and all of these stuff. Um, if I have the privilege to do it, if I'm in a business trip or whatever, and I had the day in the weekend, just an hour by the beach, man, will do it.
Yeah,
Like that's
always.
my go-to. Breathing
Cool.
and for the mind and for everything,
Yeah.
absolutely, it is the go-to. Yeah.
All right. So I'd like to close on a. I always like to close on a note of gratitude. So, what is something, a gift somebody has given you that has had a positive impact on your life?
Mm. I think, the gift of time. If somebody gives you time, I appreciate it because in such a fast-moving, you know, uh, world that we're living in, time is becoming one of the most expensive things that you can give to anyone. And if someone chooses to give me an advice, to actually listen to me and listen to my questions and all of these stuff, I have a lot of gratitude, for such people. And I just leave these, especially if I know how busy they are, but I needed to share something or just get a second opinion. I appreciate people's time, and I never feel bad if somebody says I don't have the time or I have to, because I run a similar schedule. But if I get it, I'm very grateful, honestly, to anyone who would give me the time, and listen to that. So yeah, it's an advice to everyone. Time is, people could choose to go rest and have fun and do other stuff, but if they choose to give you this time, just use it wisely and have all the gratitude, for it.
Yeah, agreed. And on that note, thank you for your time. Thank you for your openness.
Thank you.
Uh, Thank you for sharing with me and the listeners. And hope to have
Thank you,
you
Ali.
back on sometime.
Thank you, Ali. It was really enjoyable, very, very, very interesting. So, wish you best of luck with the rest of the episodes and the guests. You already had some amazing guests, but wish you the best. Have a lovely day.
Thank you very much, Amal.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Startups Arabia podcast. If there was something you really liked about what the guest said today, reach out to them on social media and tell them what you liked. And of course, if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? You don't want to miss any of our great upcoming episodes. Also, please rate us and give us comments on our social media accounts so that we know how to improve. And also tell us what you like. We don't mind hearing that either. Until next time, this was your host, Ali Zwail.